think even some people listening might be like, well, it sounds kind of scary. And
yeah,
sure.
Yep.
Sure. But I taught myself through my year of no fear that the idea that in my body when I'm afraid or excited, it's the same sensation. The only thing that shifts is what you think is happening.
Mm-hmm. Welcome to the Kicked in the Junk podcast. This is a podcast where we discuss the low times in life, where we talk about when the things that have just hit us so hard and it feels like we can never recover from. We discuss it all and look at, the raw emotion that we feel during those times. But more importantly, what would we learn from these low moments and how sometimes those moments catapult us into the next amazing thing that we didn't even see coming. Hello world, it's Nathaniel here with Kicked in the Junk. In this episode, I have an amazing discussion with my wife, my best friend, Emily Berg. Emily's a life coach, and we chat about vulnerability, specifically in relationships. We talk about our history and some of the things that we did to be vulnerable in our relationship, and sometimes how being vulnerable in certain scenarios might not always be best and how to avoid that. And even looking at the recipe and what that looks like to be vulnerable and how to get yourself in a place so that way being vulnerable becomes easier, and the benefits of vulnerability and what that looks like when you get to the other side. So I hope you enjoy. Well, hello again, Emily. Fancy seeing you here.
This is so strange.
What are the odds that you're on the show again?
I love being on this.
Well, I appreciate you being here. As always, I appreciate you as a person, as a coach, and as a partner. And it's fitting because today we are talking about relationships. We're kind of diving more into that. Mm-hmm. And specifically talking about vulnerability in relationships. And it can be so painful, yet so wonderful. Mm-hmm. And it requires so much presence. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious to see, because again, you're helping people with this, and your take on it and some previous experiences with it. So yeah, we're gonna dive right into it. Yeah.
I mean, vulnerability is one of my favorite topics because it is so powerful, it is so misconstrued, and it's so expansive all at the same time.
Right.
And I mean, for me personally, it took a lot to come into vulnerability. I think a lot of the time vulnerability can get confused with oh my goodness, it just left my brain.
Weakness.
Definitely a weakness, but also with a very porous, oh my gosh, it totally lost, it was in my brain like a second ago. You know when something happens like that and then the more you think about it, the farther away it gets. Yeah. Okay. It'll come to me, but it can get confused with the idea that you kind of are word vomiting on people and you're emotionally dumping on them, right? Because vulnerability is not the same as that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why...
It's emotional dumping.
Yeah, it's not the same as emotional dumping because and I think that's where people can kind of shy away from it because it's not fun to be emotionally dumped on. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about like a good dumping, like...
yeah, I know what you mean.
Like
you met a stranger and then they're telling you their whole life story and you're like, whoa, I mean, okay, cool. I'm like trying to be nice and be present, but there's also a point like, oh,
this is a lot for me.
Yeah, it's a lot for me right now. Yeah. And I don't know if I can even help you or no,
Yeah, and I did that. Yeah. I did that for a little while after I was going through my divorce. Mm-hmm. I ended up meeting a new group of people and, trying to learn how to make new friends. Like 16 years with someone, it's like you had your life planned out, and then even though it wasn't meant, it wasn't a good life plan, it was still the plan.
Something, yeah.
And so trying to make new friends was really interesting for me. Plus, trying to deal with what I was going through emotionally, and I didn't realize it at the time because everyone would ask, how are you doing? And I'm an honest person. I wasn't doing that great.
Yeah. So it's funny because it's like, nah, it wasn't good. But it's so true. So this is like the paradox. It's Brene Brown talks about that. It's like, it's the one thing we look for in other people. Mm-hmm. Right? But we're scared to do it ourselves.
Yeah.
Like we don't want to, you can't look at me my side, but you tell me your side.
Yeah.
So it's kind of this paradox because people ask how you're doing, and then when you're truthful, it's like, oh wait, what? I didn't want to hear that.
Oh, and that's
and that's 90% of people, right?
And that's kind of the difference, though, because it's also pick your place and time. Like when
that's true. Yeah,
I was new to making these friends, right? Like,
yeah.
And there I was just spilling all the shit. Like I think I even hit on my miscarriages. I think like.
Oh
yeah.
no.
Oh yeah. Let's be real. I was looking to be seen. Like someone see me, you know. And
interesting.
And while they are super kind and lovely people, that friendship isn't really there anymore.
Not yet. Yeah.
Because it wasn't. We didn't really.
There's no foundation.
There was no foundation. I was verbal dumping on them, and I never gave them the opportunity to do the same in return. And it was, I was oversharing, and that's a very porous boundary. There's the word. I knew I'd get there.
We got there.
I had very porous boundaries at the time, and I was just it was too much. It was too much for people, and I actually got that feedback.
Right.
Because my roommate at the time.
Well, thankfully you did get that feedback.
And a lot of the times.
Because what if you go around just thinking that's normal?
Yeah, absolutely. And my roommate who was friends with some of these people had given me this feedback, and I was super grateful for that. It was, I mean, obviously it's hard to hear at the time that
it's a kick in the junk.
It's it's a good swift kick to the old groinal area, and but I was really grateful for that, and because people want to be there, they want to show up for you in that way. But it's hard at the beginning if there's not a foundation, and
totally.
And
well, not to mention too, when you're giving them all that information, how can I even show up for you? Like, I don't even know where to start. It's like it's like, oh, well, I have this problem, this, and they're like, whoa. Versus like,
and they don't even really know me.
They don't even know. Yeah, they don't know you. You don't know them.
Yeah.
Plus, even if you're a really helpful person, it's like, where do you start? Versus if it was, oh, hey, I don't know, my car broke down. Can somebody give me a lift or whatever? Something. It's like, oh, you know what I mean?
Different.
Or even if it was personal, even if it was, oh yeah, my parents just, oh, I'm sorry. It's at least we kind of know how to handle it. But when it's thing, it's a lot.
It's a lot. So I think vulnerability gets a bad rap in that sense, and I think for men it's even maybe a bit more of a challenge because vulnerability can hit on your masculine, right? And don't show weakness. I mean, how many times have you heard in like either film or movies, television, even social media, man up. Yeah. Be a man, don't be a pussy. Like there's all this stigma around the idea that vulnerability makes you weak. And it couldn't be like that is completely opposite. Expressing your vulnerability and showing up in that way, specifically with yourself and your partner and your children, I think, because as they grow up, they see the imperfections anyways, because that blanket is down, right? You're not the wizard anymore, and they see it anyway. So when you own up to it, it just drops any facade. Yeah. And I think that's what it does, and that's why it's so scary, because vulnerability allows people to see you. For you. And all the faults, all the cellulite, all the things. All
the ugly stuff.
Yeah.
Totally. I think that it's funny because you kind of hit on both sides of vulnerability. The over, I'm going to say, for lack of a term, being over vulnerable, where it's pouring your heart out to anybody. And then on the flip, which again, you still see a lot of it, and especially, to tie it into relationships, you see this a lot in relationships. It's everybody's wearing their masks, right? And they're covering themselves, and they're hiding, and nobody's, you don't see it very often, especially with people that we interact with or that we know, and you can hear it from the conversations of, oh, well, my partner doesn't like this, and oh, the eye roll and this. So but you can see they're hiding, they're having to hide who they are, or they hid who they were early, and now they're so far into this that they're like, oh, wait a minute, I don't want to be that person.
Yeah. And I mean, you put on masks as a protection, right? They're a little shield. And we come by it honestly and innocently. Like those masks, we don't intend to put them up. No. Sometimes we do. Sometimes it's very conscious, but a lot of the time it's not conscious. It's just we shell up. And when we're in that fight or flight, right? Because when your mask is up, your hackles are up, right? You're a little bit taken aback. That's your fight or flight. That's your sympathetic nervous system just, firing up a little bit. And when you're in that, we tend to regress and fall back onto our baseline habits, our baseline beliefs, and those old school things that keep us in that sympathetic state of heightened awareness, right?
And that's a good point you said that on the sympathetic, because you're right. It's if you're in that sympathetic, you're not looking to be, well, especially be vulnerable because your defenses are up. But it's really hard to connect.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really hard to have an open conversation with someone. So even if you're dating somebody or if you're new in a relationship, there's that fear there. You're oh my God, you're a little stressed out because, well, what if they don't like that I, do this or like that, or maybe I don't know, I don't like the same movies as them, right? And they're worried that they're gonna, this person's not gonna like them now because they don't like the same movies, or.
Well, I think it starts even sooner than that.
Yeah.
Like think about when we met, for instance. You were shocked when I texted you back right away.
Yeah.
Because
that's a good point.
I didn't know about the 3-day wait that you are supposed to do as a woman when a man texts you.
Yeah, totally. And so again, that's a social norm of not being vulnerable. Yeah. Of saying, well, no, this is the norm. You put him, you separate yourself a bit. Another really good example for you is what somebody knows you is that you weren't wearing makeup at the gym. Yeah. Right? That wasn't very normal at that gym. Most people did. So it was almost like this, like, it's like my subconscious was like, hey, look, like there's something different here because you didn't have your defenses up. And because you weren't on your phone hiding and trying to just not be there or doing your thing or whatever. So
the duck-faced. The duck lips selfies in the mirror.
Right? But it was like, there was like these subtle cues of vulnerability. Right? And it was like, as soon as you're like, hey, this is me, I'm like, oh wait, like you messaged me back right. Oh my God, you're interested. Holy, that's amazing. Right? And wanted to spend time and not do this song and dance of, well, there's like me, oh, I'm not sure. Oh, I'm seeing other, you know what I mean? And kind of, being afraid of what it could be.
And I think people sometimes get confused on that too with vulnerability, that it is in those little moments. Vulnerability doesn't have to be this big, expensive, I'm having this massive vulnerable moment, which are beautiful as well. Those are a beautiful, intimate, insanely connective moment. But sometimes there's those little moments of vulnerability.
That's a very good point. Like, you're right. It's just the little thing to,
It's the micro moments.
Yeah, these little micro moments where, hey, yeah, I want to, I think of a good example is message me back right away. I was like, oh, there's a little bit of vulnerability because the social norm around here anyway, and in my experience, is, oh, you don't message back. Like you said, you don't message back. Or you wait a few days. And, oh, maybe I'm not. And you kind of play this hard to get game. Because, it's this idea that you're busy or, whatever it is.
It's almost like high school days. You're the popular kid.
Yeah, exactly. Versus being like, no, I actually want to, let's see what we can do here. Let's see, you just be vulnerable enough to just meet with somebody. Oh. Right? And it's funny, because on the flip, again, us meeting, our first date being in a bar, which is hilarious, or a pub, because neither of us drink, neither of us go to the pubs or bars or any of that. So it's so funny. So both of us kind of stepping out of that, being a little bit vulnerable, especially for me, because, well, that was never a thing. No. Right? So, again, a little moment of vulnerability. You look at, I messaged you, I think we hung out the next night. I messaged you again, and it was like, hey, do you want to hang out? And it was like, yeah, sure. Again, not playing this, putting up this mask of, well, will he like me? Will he not like me? Oh, I got to play hard to get. No, it's just you led with your heart. And that's, I think, the difference there is you're present and you're leading with your heart, and you weren't, and you knew what you wanted. Yeah. Right? And that, what you think about that, and I think even some people listening might be like, well, it sounds kind of scary. And sure. Yep. Sure. But I taught myself through my year of no fear that the idea that in my body, when I'm afraid or excited, it's the same sensation. The only thing that shifts is what you think is happening. So it's you just change your mind. I'm not scared. I'm just super stoked. Yeah. Super excited. I'm fired up. Totally.
Right?
No, I think that's a really good way to word it. And I think of people that I've known now, that are dating relationships, in and out of relationships, what have you. And they get in these, well, I can't, things like, I can't find a guy, I can't find a girl. You hear that. But then it's like, when you talk to them and you find out their story, it's like, well, you want that guy, that girl, whoever it is, you want that person, but then you're not willing to be that person and be vulnerable when that person comes.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
I think that's the kicker there. It's like, you have to be like, and on the flip, it could hurt.
Yeah.
It could hurt a lot, like where it's like, hey, I'm going to put my heart out there, I'm going to do it, I'm going to be vulnerable. Again, showing the little moments of vulnerability, right? And just think, hey, I can do this. And
you build trust that way, right? Like when you show those micro moments of vulnerability and you have the correct responses with the right person, you're building the trust that, okay, even subconsciously, it's not necessarily a conscious thing, but your nervous system is learning that, okay. Yeah. It didn't hurt.
I'm not afraid. Yeah. It's not going to be,
It doesn't mean the fear is not going to come again. It doesn't mean vulnerability is suddenly easy. Like, I still, it's still hard.
We still, even today and like recently, we've had to have that, okay, I'm still, like, I still have to open up to you and vice versa. I'm telling you, it's still tough, but
Thank goodness for that.
Totally, yeah. And I think we kind of set our relationship on that being vulnerable, right? If you look at the foundation of it, was being vulnerable, stepping out of our comfort zone a little bit, doing things that we haven't really done before, saying yes to somebody you just met at the gym, meeting somebody at a pub, like, just, and then it wasn't just that, there's a lot more. Another example is vulnerable enough to move in a short time, and vulnerable enough to admit when we were feeling something, when it wasn't just like, oh, I like this person, it was like, oh, I'm like falling for this person, and not putting up the defenses and worried about what your friends think, or worried about what society says, oh, you can't fall in love that quickly, or whatever it is. Because I think I was after like 3 weeks, I'm in my head, I'm like, I can marry this woman. Which is wild, because 3 weeks earlier I was like, I'm never fucking marrying again, ever on earth. This is never happening. Just 3 weeks later being like, nope, this is like, I can see this. Which is wild. And it wasn't like I just set my mind on that. It was a long time, it was a while that. So, but it was allowing for that change and allowing to be vulnerable and letting myself feel those things.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it's not easy, right? Like, vulnerability comes in waves, and it plays on our fears.
Yeah.
It plays on our fears a lot.
Totally. It's on the other side of that.
Yeah.
Right? You have to be vulnerable or there's going to be fear there. But I think just kind of like sort of we talked about fear before, is on the other side of that fear is the thing that you actually want.
Oh, 100%.
So it's like you have to be vulnerable.
You weed people out too.
Yeah.
Like if I had texted you back right away and you're like, oh God, this woman's needy. No, I'm out.
Exactly.
Right? Then I weeded out someone who obviously wasn't right for me.
That's a good
because
point.
I was being me. Because I wasn't needy. I was just like,
no.
In my head, I'm like, hey, he texted. First off, it's rude not to message back. And second off, I like this guy. He seems kind of cool.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't I want to spend time with him?
Or at least try.
Right?
Yeah.
And you, like I said, on the flip side, could have been, oh God, she's too needy. And then I've just avoided something by just being myself. And that's okay, right? Like, we weed out people in our lives through, because people will come and go, right? Friends will come and go. Relationships will come and go until you find the person that's meant for you. And you are constantly moving and expanding who you are anyway. So what shows as vulnerability today is going to be a strength of mine in the future. And then I'll have vulnerability on something new.
Yep.
And that's okay.
Absolutely. And just thinking of the vulnerability. It's vulnerability is the action, right? So it's almost like this, like especially in relationships, I kind of play out almost any scenario. I'm thinking, a difficult conversation about sex. There's fear there.
Oh yeah.
Because you could be rejected. Your ego could get hurt. That's the thing that stops us from talking about, is your ego. And then there's fear, vulnerability being the action, and then again, it's okay, hey, I'm going to open up and tell you how I feel. So that way you can, and then the funny part is it's like in this like sequence, and then the other side of that is what you want. But most people don't want to do this because could be tough.
Because it's hard.
It's tough. And I think for both parties, the work to make vulnerability easier, and we've done this lots of just being present, right? And having a good mind state. And for me, we talk about this all the time, but for me, that looks like meditation.
Oh, yeah.
For you, I know definitely helps. For you, and we've talked about lots, is making sure you exercise, making sure you're physical.
Super important.
Just for your own, for yours.
My mental health.
Yeah, totally. And when you're in that good state, and not being bombarded by whatever, your social media is saying, oh, this is what it should look like, this is what it should look like, but being present, then when this fear comes up, you're not running away and hiding and going, oh my God, it's this, oh, it's not this perfect, oh, whatever. You're going, hey, you know what, there could be something here. Right? So in terms of practice, that's kind of where my head went there, is that, yeah, this is what it looks like when you practice it.
Yeah, like you mean practice that vulnerability is like an exercise.
Practice vulnerability is an exercise.
It's like conscious vulnerability.
Yeah, and then your precursors to being able to be vulnerable, being, like I said, meditation for myself, exercising, checking in with myself too, to see how I'm feeling and why I'm feeling that way, right? Because if a good example is if we met and I was having a really crummy day, just really bad, shitty day, and let's say I got rejected a few times on a date or something, I don't know, whatever, and then I saw you, would I have the courage to even talk to you?
Yeah.
Right? And probably, maybe not. Right? So, and on that note too, right? It was my gut that was telling me to talk to you because, hey, there's something different here. This girl's different. Right. Seen her a few times. She's actually working out. She's not, she's like doing something different here. So I was able to, had enough awareness in my gut too to listen to that.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely is vulnerability, again, those micro moments, but then actively doing things so that way when the time comes, it's easier.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. And really sitting with the fear, like when you especially when you're coming into something new and you have your first spat or something with this new interest that you have, whether it be a spat or disagreement or, it's almost like that honeymoon balloon gets popped a little bit or a little fracture in it at the beginning. It's just allowing for an opportunity to look at where you're coming from in your triggering, right?
Yeah.
And then showing up if this is someone you want to be with. Sometimes when those things happen, you're like, okay, this maybe isn't the person for me. But if it's someone where this is just like a little weird side hiccup, and then you get the opportunity then to have, to show who you are and why that situation that you found yourself in with this person, why it was triggering or why it brought something up for you.
Totally. And I know we've had lots of conversations about that.
Oh yeah,
for both of us. And yeah, it is vulnerability, a huge amount. It takes a huge amount. And I think, and the beautiful part about it really is like every time you do that, like you said before, it builds that little bit of trust.
Oh yeah.
There's a little trust, you're building that trust bank. And so when the time comes, when something bigger comes, it's like, okay, right, I already know, I have this foundation of trust there that I can be vulnerable and
allow the other person as well.
And realize like people are going to make mistakes. Relationships are amazing and wonderful and beautiful, and miscommunication happens a lot. You say the wrong things. We're both verbal communicators, so that makes things, or verbal processors, sorry. Yeah. So that makes things interesting because you're like, wait, I said the wrong thing. Right? But allowing for that and allowing for and having that flexibility. Yeah. Right? Because it's not going to be this linear thing.
No. And I think thank goodness for that. Oh my goodness. That's where the beauty of it lies.
Yeah, absolutely. Because then you end up learning more. I find I've learned more about you, and I feel like every time we've had these moments of vulnerable, it brought us closer together. Every time.
Because we've managed to work this into our lives in through vulnerability and communication, which I think is another. But I think that I like to keep those separate. But I mean, you express vulnerability through communication, but you also express it through action, like you said. So. Yeah. that's why I find those two things quite separate. But using vulnerability as a great way to facilitate communication and even be a starting point to build something deeper. And I think that's what we've managed to do, because we haven't fought. We've never fought.
Yeah, it's actually it's a good point. I mean, we've been together 4 years.
4.5, just about.
Yeah, been married for 2.5 or 2 and a bit.
2 and a bit, yeah.
And you're right. And this isn't like a brag or boasting. It's just, I think it's exactly that. It's because we practice so much presence, mindfulness, open-heartedness, allowing for each other to communicate with those whoopsies and I've said the wrong thing, allowing for that. It's just, all it is it's dialogue. It's sometimes there's uncomfortable, there's some pain
100%.
and a little bit of hurt sometimes too, from previous stuff.
Yep.
And mistakes.
Oh yeah.
But then it allows for a deeper connection and more trust. So that way when the next thing comes up, it's like, all right, we've already had discussion about this, and this. It's easy. A good example I think of myself is, like, I couldn't talk about sex with you up until like last year, I think.
I think a little bit before that, but
but it was odd. Like I thought it was like, oh my god, I can't. We just don't talk.
Awkward, taboo,
yeah, right. Because I tell you what I like or don't like, whatever. Because you're being super vulnerable, and it was the same, And so obviously,
same, super big struggle on that one.
Totally, but how much better has it been now that we're able to be vulnerable about it? And even then, even when we still talk about it, there's still that little bit, that little. Whoever's not just that little side of me that's like, oh, is she going to reject it? And never is. It's always welcomed and appreciated, but there's always that little bit there. Okay. So I think that's a good point. Kind of you said earlier, it's like there's always going to be that little bit there, but it's just recognizing like on the other side, it's better.
Oh my goodness. And I mean, yes, sex talk. Every couple should talk about it. But like vulnerability on those micro moments is even as something as beautiful and simple as cooking. Like when you cook for someone, it's typically quite personal. And for the recipient to actually state if something isn't delicious, like both parties are opening themselves up for a deeper and I know it seems silly. It seems like such a silly example, but
it's not.
But being able to be like, example. Maybe that's too much pepper, or Or that would be better if it was like with cauliflower or something like that, because it's like we don't want to critique, and it doesn't have to be a criticism.
No.
It can be a way to build something. Like, it actually took me a little bit when I first started cooking for you and then asking your opinion.
Yeah.
It's like I wasn't expecting, because at the beginning of the relationship you always just said everything was awesome.
Well, because it was.
Okay, that's fair. But then when we started cooking together more, and like the first time I made you chili, you took a bite and you're like, no, it needs this. And at first off, I was like, you mean it's not hurt? Yeah, not hurt, but it was
just like, wait, what?
Yeah. It was like, oh, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And then we put it in. I was like, oh my god, it's so much better. You added maple syrup or something like that, a sweetness.
Yeah, I remember that. It was maple syrup. Yeah.
Yeah, and
now we're got a cooking show. This is great.
This is awesome.
Yeah.
But it was actually in that moment, because you probably didn't even think about the fact that you were critiquing in a sense, but you were just adding an opinion and a thought and an idea. And I could have taken it personally and almost like, I've had that before. It's perfect. What's he talking about? But instead, I like opened myself up to that vulnerability, and that my cooking isn't perfect. And it's better with him.
Totally. And it's so funny, because I was just thinking, like, that's such a weird example, but any couple that's in a relationship that does any cooking together, which if they're not doing it, I encourage they do it, or cook for each other, it's actually super common.
Nice.
Super nice. It's good to do, and it's super common, because I've had the opposite. We're like, hey, you know what? This is good. It'd be really good with this, and you get shut down. Oh, well, this, and you're like, oh, okay, I guess. You know what I mean? You're going like, I just thought it was a different way to do it, or something way to try it, and you get shut down. Well, then that's taking out of that trust bank.
Totally.
Right?
Oh yeah.
So it's like, it's, you know, kind of ties into, well, it's asking for what you want at that time, at that moment, right? And it's both being vulnerable, then, like you said, for you to be able to, you're right. But how can, you know, and it's kind of recognize, like, how can I know everything he's going to like in this one meal, and I've only known him a year, two years, even 5 years, right? And not to mention, he could change a little bit. And that's normal.
Oh, and that's the beautiful part of it, is that in that simple moment, I got to learn within myself that I don't have perfect, like, it wasn't perfect. Thank goodness for that. But I also got to know that he's here with me. He took it seriously. He tasted it. That's a good point. He felt the heat. The heat was good. Okay, what's missing? And he could have, you could have just, oh, it's great.
Yeah.
And in the back of your mind, you're actually like, it would have been better like this.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point.
You actually, you took it seriously, and you tasted it, and you brought it in, and you contributed. That is contributing to the relationship.
Absolutely.
In that moment.
And that's and to kind of, you know, take away the cooking part, but just look at the recipe, so to speak. But again, it's having enough good examples. If I'm stressed, tired, whatever, and you're like, hey, how does this taste like? And sometimes I'm like, honestly, my head's not here.
Yep.
And I have enough like awareness to be like, I'm not here. You better asking the wall, right?
Yeah, and you've told me that.
Yeah, and I have. But at that moment, okay, hey, you know, no, I can be here. I'm present, and I'm engaged in this, and honest and open, right? And willing to, because we already had that trust built up, to willing to go back, or willing to just say, hey, you know, no, I don't agree with this, and this is why, or I would do it this way, and this is why. But I think you're like you said before, it's those micro moments, and those micro moments, sometimes, especially initially, you do have to be, you want to be very, I won't say present, but you know, sometimes it's just how you're wording things.
Oh yeah.
Right? It's like, hey, you know what? I've said this a lot. I think at the beginning I said lots. It's like, this is super good, and I appreciate you making this. Next time, could you do it like this? Because I like it this way a little bit. I like it this way better. And you're like, oh my god, of course.
Yeah. Oh,
and I've done that a lot. I've done it lots, but a few times. So, you know, for anybody that's new in a relationship, those are little things. So I guess my question to you is, what would be other little micro moments? Couple, you know, before we wrap this up, what would be a couple other micro moments of vulnerability that are good opportunities to build that trust?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I'd have to think about it. I mean, it's like those moments where you feel that shift in something is kind of off, or something tweaked you, and those little tweaks, and just really looking at what that is and expressing it.
Oh, that's a really good one. I was thinking something as simple as like wearing like certain clothes you wear because I think you'll like it. But no, that is
that. Well, that yes, that
those
too.
are surfacey stuff. But no, that's a really good point. Is like, hey, you know what? You've said it to me before, and it kind of, I remember when you said it to me, and I was like, oh, all right. And I called you babe. And you didn't like, because there was a few times I said it in like a...
no, babe, I liked it was baby.
Baby, that's right, yeah. Yeah. And I was like, oh. And it was funny, because I remember the moment of like, well, that kind of like, I don't know, for some reason I remember you said it, and it felt, it hurt, it not hurt, it didn't hurt. It just didn't feel nice.
It like hit your pride or something.
Hit my pride, that's the word I'm looking for. It hit my pride. But it was, I'm glad you said though, because it was a little micro moment of vulnerability for you being like, I don't like this. And then you go like, okay, right, like she doesn't like it. I don't have to say it. I can find a different word. You know, and then kind of take a moment to not be upset and go, well, oh, whatever, you're just being, you know, freak out. But it's going, no, you know what? Okay, yeah, that's actually not like crazy. You're not, you know what I mean? So yeah, there's a great example of asking for what you want. And
it was, for me, it was like a moment of, I was just noticing like you had been using that little pet name, and I kept having this reaction in my body in it, and I felt myself not responding to you on it, and I couldn't quite name it, and it took me, I will say, it took me a little bit to express that it bothered me because I didn't know how to do it. Am I going to hurt his feelings?
Yeah.
Is he going to be upset with me? Like,
yep.
And something as simple as that, right? But then I was like, okay, there's no blame here. It's like, and how can he know that this is tweaking me out? Well, not tweaking me out, but
it doesn't feel right.
Yeah. How can he know that this is kind of twitching for me if I don't tell him?
Yeah.
And it's not like, oh, would you stop calling me that? It's like how you express it is huge.
Totally.
I think I just said, I'm noticing that I don't particularly like being called that.
Yeah, like it was almost exactly what you said, something like that. And it was like, oh, okay. And
yeah. And then you had your reaction without blaming me, without like being like, let's
whatever, just whatever, just being stupid, whatever, just saying whatever I want, being reactive, right, and not present, and not realizing, hey, there's somebody I love, I care about immensely, and she's asking me for a small thing. Why wouldn't I want to do that? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
it's like it's almost like you get to be vulnerable when someone is expressing their vulnerability.
Yeah.
You get an opportunity to show up in that way.
Yep. Yeah, that's a really good point, because the alternative is, and I've seen this, I've been the person doing it, and I've had it done to me, is like, well, whatever, and just blow them off and just, you're just being this.
Yep.
And instead of being vulnerable and taking a moment to be like, you know what, you're right, I actually could do that, and admitting that you can do something different.
Yeah, and I can do that for you.
I can change, or I can, and it doesn't mean like changes, because sometimes we think of change as like, oh, you're changing, oh, you got to change who I am. It's like, no, I just don't have to say that. I can just navigate differently, right? And that's okay. It doesn't mean I'm doing something that doesn't align with my beliefs or my values. It's something as simple as adding some maple syrup to some chili, or not calling you baby.
Right?
Pretty little things, but it's funny because people,
those little
that will cause fights.
Oh,
and
because it builds up.
Yeah, it builds up, and then until pretty soon it's like, and then now these little things, and then when something big comes, it's like bam.
And then you bring up, and you call me baby, and I don't like it, and you do this.
Sometimes they don't even bring it up. It's just their that's stored up, and the resentment's there.
Right.
That's the key word there, is the resentment's just holding on there, and then it goes boom, and then you unload on your partner.
Yeah.
Or you're just going, when you start berating them with whatever. Because of all these other things. Versus if you just say the little thing, have the uncomfortable conversation. We talk about lots, have the uncomfortable conversation, be vulnerable. It's not so bad.
Yeah.
It's like
I think those moments have saved us from fights.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like we talk a lot. It's like the Band-Aid. You're pulling off a Band-Aid. Yeah, it's not like the most fun thing to do, but when once you rip it off, you're like, oh, okay, it's actually not that bad.
Yeah.
And then it's healed.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah.
That's a really good example, and I think more people need to understand that, and just realize like there's some really cool things and beautiful relationship opportunity on the other side of being vulnerable.
Oh yeah.
Whether you're in the dating world and you're trying to find a partner, right, or you're in a relationship right now and it's new, and you're just building things, or even if you're been with a partner for 10 years, 15 years, it's like, why not sit down with them and have that conversation of, hey, this is actually who I want to be, or who I am, or
I think even before that, you almost have to express it within yourself first. Like, be vulnerable with yourself. Be truly honest and vulnerable with yourself.
That's a good point, yeah. And
sit down and because that's with the baby thing. I had to sit there with myself before I said it to you, and okay, it's irking me. Okay, what is it? And it's just, okay, it wasn't me. It just wasn't me. And I think, we could all use a little more of that with ourselves and with our partners. And
absolutely. And it's taking, and again, to the recipe being present.
Oh yeah.
Right? Being mindful of how you feel at the time. Again, if work's pissing you off, don't have a big conversation about sex or money at that moment. If it's your boss is pissing you off, you come straight home. Don't have a big conversation right away, right?
Or if your partner wants to, tell them,
I need a minute.
I need
10, 15 minutes. I need 20 minutes. I need to meditate. I need to exercise. I need to do something. I need to go for a run. I need something to just get my head off of this, and so I can be here and be present, and then check in with how I'm feeling, and then so I can be vulnerable, and then we can have the beautiful thing on the other side. But I think on one more note on that, and this is something I noticed we've practiced lots, is it's when we're having those conversations, they're not fast conversations.
No.
It's like, I notice I have to do this. I'm talking very slow, and it's not like a belittling. It's like I'm being very careful in how I'm saying things, because I want to portray my tone, my voice, everything I'm saying in the best way I possibly can. So it's not like, okay, yeah, sure, yeah, fine. It's like, oh, okay, no, all right, I understand why you say that. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I can do this, and this is why, and I'm, you know, really not just trying to, because if you, oh yeah, then it sounds like you're brushing it off. Right?
Totally. Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, it was a good conversation, Emily, as always, but
it was a good one.
Yeah, but hopefully, you know, I've said before, the whole purpose of doing this is because these are the things I wish, and I'm sure you wish you knew when you were 20. Mm-hmm. Right? Oh, sorry, piece silly.
Don't hurt it.
But you wish you knew these things when you're 20. Right?
Yeah.
And that's what I hope is that people watching, or even whether you're in a new relationship, you're dating, you're divorced, and you're trying to get back out there, things to consider, right? Yeah. Things to just chew on and realize, like, this will make your relationship so deep.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And wonderful.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Awesome. Thanks, my love.
Thanks, babe.
So thanks again for listening. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to learn. And again, that recipe for vulnerability, like I said, is being present, making sure you're in a good mindset. And I would say before is speaking slowly. That's something I have to work on all the time, so that way you can clearly articulate what you're trying to say and mean. And if you're on the other side of that, allowing for that flexibility, right? Realizing that it's not just going to be this conversation just linear. There's going to be some whoopses and mistakes, and so maybe they're going to misspeak or say something different. And allow for that, and realize it's okay that, you know, something's different, or something's changing, or maybe you did something wrong, or just not what they want at the time, and that's okay. Or just allowing for somebody to open up and be vulnerable, and you know, thank them for doing that, because it takes a lot of courage to do that. So thanks again for listening. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now.